The blood on the porch wasn't the worst part. Royce Barrett had seen blood before. He'd dressed deer and skinned rabbits since he was old enough to hold a knife steady. He knew the smell, the texture, the way it turned dark on the dry wood. What made his stomach turn, what made the bile rise in his throat, was the pattern of it. It wasn't a splash from a cut. It was a deliberate smear, a thick, ugly trail leading from the busted front door to the corral. Someone had been dragged. Dragged, fighting. His father's horse, old reliable Bess, stood in the barn, unsaddled, which was wrong. His father never left a horse saddled overnight, but he never left it unsaddled if he was just riding out. The front door hung open on one shattered hinge, splintered wood gaping like a wound. And in the dust, right near the steps, lay his father's hat. It wasn't just dropped. It was crushed flat, as if someone had ground it under a boot heel, twisting it back and forth with real, personal satisfaction. No bodies, no father, just the hat, the blood, and the boot prints. So many boot prints. They led in circles around the property, fanning out and coming back, like a pack of wolves hunting for something they couldn't find. Royce let the 2 rabbits he'd been carrying slip from his numb fingers. They hit the dust with a soft, heavy thud that seemed to echo in the terrible, unnatural silence. His rifle came up without thought, his finger finding the trigger, his eyes sweeping the homestead, the barn, the ridgeline. Nothing moved. Nothing except the wind, pushing through that broken doorway, whistling a dead tune. It carried the copper smell of blood and something else. Something new. Something chemical and wrong that didn't belong on a ranch. It smelled like the city, like sulfur, like something that burned without fire. He crept toward the house, rifle leveled. The inside was worse. Total destruction. Furniture overturned, stuffing pulled from the cushions. His father's desk, the one his grandfather had built, was ransacked, with papers scattered like dead leaves across the floor. The strongbox stood open, empty. That made sense. Men like this always took the money. But that wasn't all they'd taken. They had torn up the floorboards, not just in one spot, but in 3. Pried them loose with a crowbar that lay abandoned in the corner, still sticky with something. And they'd torn the stones out of the fireplace, reaching back into the chimney until their arms were black with soot. They'd sliced open the mattress, feathers drifting in the air like a snowfall in hell. Whatever they were looking for, it wasn't just the money in the strongbox. They were looking for something hidden, something secret. Then he heard it, a sound from the back bedroom, a wet, rattling gasp. Royce spun, rifle aimed at the doorway. "Who's there?" Silence. Then the sound again, weaker this time, a cough and a low moan. He found Sterling Rhodes in the back bedroom, alive, but barely. Royce's breath caught in his chest. His father's face was a mask of purple and swollen flesh. One eye was sealed completely shut. His breathing came in wet, torn rattles that made Royce think of broken bellows. Someone had beaten him. Not quickly. They had beaten him methodically. They had taken their time. His ribs stood out at wrong angles under his torn shirt. Sterling's good eye cracked open when Royce knelt beside him, the rifle clattering to the floor. His father's hand, knuckles split and bleeding, reached out. It gripped Royce's wrist with a strength that was shocking, a dead man's grip. "Royce." The word came out broken, choked with blood. "Wade Langston, 10 men. I'll get the doctor, Pa. I'll ride to town." "No." "Time." Sterling coughed, and blood flecked his lips. He was drowning from the inside. "They'll be back. They're looking for." He paused, struggling for a single breath. "Looking for what they think I buried. They won't stop." Royce felt something colder than the high desert night settle in his chest. "What did you bury, Pa? What gold?" "Nothing." Sterling's grip tightened, his fingernails digging into Royce's skin. "That's the problem. There is no gold." He coughed again, a terrible wet sound. But they think I did. Wade, he heard stories about your grandfather, thinks there's gold on this land. Is there? No. Sterling's breathing was getting worse, shallower. But he won't believe that. He'll kill us both, to be sure. Royce looked at his father's ruined face, at the deliberate, cruel work of Wade Langston's boot. He felt a rage so pure and so hot it almost choked him. Wade Langston. He knew the name. Everyone in the territory knew it. A man who took what he wanted and buried anyone who stood in his way. "I'll kill him," Royce said, his voice quiet and shaking. "You'll die." Sterling pulled him closer, his one good eye desperate. 10 men, boy, maybe more by now. You're 16. You're fast with a rifle, but you're not fast enough for that. He coughed again, harder this time, and his body seized. "There's only one way," Sterling gasped, holding on. "Only one. Chance." "What chance?" "The Navajo, Ashki." Sterling's eye found his son's face, trying to burn the words into him. "I kept my word. To them, all these years, fair trade, respect. They remember." His breathing was becoming labored. Each word was a mountain to climb. "Find Ashki. Tell him Sterling Roads. Calls in the debt of honor." Royce had no idea what that meant. A debt? His father traded blankets and flour for jerky and hides. What debt could be worth this? "Tell him Wade Langston is killing his people too, taking their land. He's poisoning the water holes." That chemical smell. It wasn't random. It was poison. Sterling gripped Royce's shirt, his knuckles white. "They'll listen, because you're my son, but you'll have to. Prove you're worthy, Ashki. Doesn't help cowards or fools. How do I find him? Where?" "North, Red Canyon, 3 days' ride." Sterling's eyes started to close. "Follow the red rocks until you see the eagle, carved in stone. They'll find you. After that." His hand fell away from Royce's shirt. "Go, now. I can't just leave you. You must." Sterling's voice was a whisper. "I'll hold on, but if you don't come back, with help." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Royce stood, his mind racing. 3 days. 3 days to find a band of Navajo warriors who had every reason to hate white men. 3 days to convince them to risk their lives for his father. 3 days before Wade Langston came back to finish what he started, to tear the ranch apart until he found the gold that didn't exist. He grabbed his rifle. He filled his canteen from the bucket in the kitchen, his hands shaking so badly he spilled half the water. He took a loaf of bread and a strip of dried meat. He took one last look at his father, lying broken in the bed, his chest barely moving. Then he ran for the barn, for his horse, knowing that when he climbed into that saddle, he was riding toward something that would either save his father or kill them both. He was halfway to the barn when a rifle shot cracked the silence. The bullet splintered the wooden corral post right next to his head. Royce dove to the ground, rolling behind a water trough as another shot thwacked into the wood, spraying him with water. Langston hadn't taken all his men. He'd left a lookout. Royce peered around the edge of the trough. On the ridge overlooking the ranch, maybe 500 yards out, a man was hunkered down, already reloading. He was too far away to be an easy shot, and he had the high ground. He was pinned down. He couldn't get to his horse. He couldn't leave. And in the house, his father was dying, breath by breath. The man on the ridge fired again, the bullet whining over Royce's head. He was just playing with him, keeping him trapped. Royce's mind raced. The barn, his horse. He had to get to the barn. He looked at the house. He looked at the barn. There was 50 yards of open, empty ground between him and the stable door. He'd be dead before he took 5 steps. He thought about his father's words. Ashki doesn't help cowards. Or fools. He couldn't be a coward, so he had to stop being a fool. He looked at the blood trail. the one that led from the porch to the corral. It passed right by the chicken coop. He took a slow breath. He aimed his rifle. Not at the man on the ridge. He aimed it at the latch on the chicken coop. He fired. The old wood lock splintered. He fired again, at the hinge. The door swung open. A dozen frantic chickens burst out, squawking and flapping into the open yard. The lookout on the ridge, surprised by the sudden movement, fired instinctively. Whoomp! A cloud of feathers exploded where a chicken had been. He fired again. Another puff of feathers. He was distracted. Now, Royce whispered. He bolted from behind the trough. He ran low, sprinting across the open ground, zigzagging as the chickens scattered in every direction. Crack! A bullet kicked up dust at his heels. The lookout was reloading, cursing. Crack! This one was closer, singing past his ear. He dove, shoulder first, through the open barn door, landing hard on the packed earth and hay. He was safe. He was alive. He scrambled to his horse, saddling it with trembling hands, his heart hammering against his ribs. He led the horse to the back of the barn, to the wide doors that opened away from the ridge. He threw them open, swung into the saddle, and kicked the horse into a gallop. He rode low, using the barn as a shield until he was 100 yards out, then veered into a dry creek bed, keeping his head down, pushing the horse harder than he ever had before. He didn't look back. Behind him, Sterling Rhodes watched his son disappear through the broken doorway of the house. He'd seen the whole thing, the rifle shots, the chickens, the desperate run. He closed his one good eye, focused on the simple, agonizing act of breathing, counting each one like a man counting the last coins in an empty purse. He had to last 3 days, maybe 4, just long enough for his son to become the man this land required him to be. And somewhere to the north, in the Red Canyon country where most white men vanished, a Navajo war chief named Ashki sharpened his knife, unaware that a boy was coming, a boy who would ask him to go to war. The horse's rhythm became Royce's heartbeat. Gallop, gallop, gallop. 3 days. 3 days to find men who might kill him on sight. 3 days before Wade Langston came back to murder his father. The sun hung low behind him, casting his shadow long and thin across the scrubland. He pushed north, toward the Red Canyon country, his father's words echoing with every hoofbeat. The Navajo, Ashki, a debt of honor. But what debt? Sterling had never spoken much about his dealings with the native people. Just that a man kept his word, or he was nothing. Royce had seen the trade exchanges. He'd watched his father leave flour and new blankets at the edge of their property line, at a flat stone everyone knew was the marker. Then, days later, they'd return to find dried meat, tanned hides, and sometimes small woven baskets of mountain berries. Fair trade, no word spoken, just trust, built over 20 years. Once, when Royce was 10, he'd asked why they didn't just go to the trading post in town, like everyone else. Sterling had looked at him with an expression Royce only understood now, a mixture of disappointment and patience. Because those people were here first, boy. This land, all of it, belonged to them long before any white man drew a map. The least we can do is treat them with the respect they deserve. But Pa, everyone says they're dangerous, savages. Everyone says a lot of things. Sterling had put his hand on Royce's shoulder, a heavy, warm weight. You judge a man by his actions, not by what scared people whisper about him. The Navajo keep their word better than most white men I know. You remember that. Royce remembered. He also remembered 2 summers ago when a renegade band of Utes had swept through the valley. They'd burned 3 homesteads and killed 2 families. But his father's ranch had been untouched. The raiders had ridden past their property line as if an invisible wall stood there. Sterling never spoke of it, but Royce had seen the small carved stone left near their well the next morning. A simple dark marker of an eagle. His father had pocketed it without comment. The land changed as he rode. The flat scrub gave way to rolling hills. then to rocky outcroppings that thrust up from the earth like the broken bones of giants. By the second morning, the red stone walls began to rise on either side of him, narrowing the path. This was it, the canyon country. This was where white men disappeared. His horse's ears swiveled forward, alert. Royce's hand moved to his rifle, scanning the canyon walls above him. Nothing visible, but he felt it. That prickle on the back of his neck, the feeling that you were being stared at by 100 eyes you couldn't see. He was being watched. "I am Sterling Roads' son," he called out, his voice echoing off the red walls, sounding small and young. "I come in peace. I need to speak with Ashki." Only the wind answered, whistling through the narrow passage. He rode forward, slowly, keeping his hands visible, his rifle pointed at the ground. The canyon walls seemed to close in tighter. The shadows lengthened, even though it was midday. His horse snorted nervously, dancing sideways. Then they appeared, not suddenly, not with a war cry. They simply were. One moment, there was nothing but rock. The next, 5 warriors sat on horseback, silent as the stone itself. They surrounded him in a perfect semicircle, cutting off any escape, front or back. They wore no paint, but their faces were hard. Their rifles lay across their laps, held with casual menace. The closest warrior, a man with a brutal scar running from his temple to his jaw, rode forward. His eyes were flat and cold. He studied Royce the way a man studies an insect right before crushing it. "You are on sacred ground," the warrior said in careful, clear English. "White men die here. My father is Sterling Roads." Royce forced himself to meet the warrior's gaze, not to look away. "He kept his word to your people for 20 years. Fair trade. Respect." The warrior's expression didn't change. Not a flicker. "Wade Langston and his men. They nearly killed him. They want our land. But my father says Wade is taking your land too, killing your people, poisoning the water. And you think we should care about one white man's problems?" the warrior asked. His voice was soft, which made it even more dangerous. "I think Wade Langston is everyone's problem." Royce's horse shifted beneath him, sensing his tension. "My father. He's dying. He says Ashki remembers honor. He says Sterling Roads kept his promises. He's calling in that debt. Now." The scarred warrior studied him for a long, silent moment. Then he turned his horse and spoke in rapid, guttural Navajo to the others. Royce caught none of it, but he saw the disagreement. One of the warriors gestured sharply toward Royce, his face angry, clearly arguing for killing him right there. The scarred warrior listened, then spoke a single sharp word that cut the argument dead. He turned back to Royce. "We will take you to Ashki." Royce let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. "But if you are lying," the warrior continued, his cold eyes narrowing, "if your father is like the other white men who make promises with a forked tongue, you will die. Slowly. Do you understand?" "I understand." "Give me your rifle." Royce hesitated. Without the rifle, he was defenseless. But he'd come this far. He handed it over, butt first. The warrior took it, examined it briefly, then slung it over his own shoulder. "Follow. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not look at the women. Do not touch anything. If you try to run," he said, "you will not make it 10 steps." They rode deeper into the canyon. The walls rose higher and higher on both sides, until the sky became just a thin, burning ribbon of blue far above. Royce had crossed into a world where his father's name might save him, or it might mean nothing at all. Behind him, miles away in the growing darkness, Sterling Roads counted his breaths, 1, 2, 3, and waited. The canyon twisted, turned, and then suddenly opened up. It was a hidden valley, held in a cup of sheer red rock. Royce counted at least 60 shelters, maybe more, scattered in the growing twilight. Smoke from dozens of cooking fires drifted up in thin, straight columns. The camp was alive. Children stopped their games to stare as the warriors rode through with their white prisoner. Women looked up from their work, their faces unreadable like stone. Old men sat in the shadows, their eyes like polished obsidian, watching him pass. Eyes that had seen too many broken treaties, too many promises from men who looked just like Royce. They stopped before the largest shelter, set slightly apart from the others. The scarred warrior dismounted and gestured for Royce to do the same. His legs were stiff from the long, fast ride, but he forced himself not to stumble. Show weakness here, and he'd never leave alive. A man emerged from the shelter. Ashki. Royce knew it instantly, not from any marking, but from the way the other warriors straightened, the way the entire camp seemed to orient itself around him, like iron filings to a magnet. He was perhaps 35, lean and hard as the canyon walls themselves. 3 pale scars marked his left cheek, like tally marks. His eyes held a sharp intelligence and something else, a deep, profound weariness, the look of a man who had dealt with too many white men who spoke of honor and delivered only death. "You are Sterling Rhodes's son." It wasn't a question. Ashki spoke English with barely an accent, which was somehow more intimidating. He circled Royce slowly, studying him from every angle, as if he were a horse he was thinking of buying. "You have his eyes," Ashki said finally, "stubborn eyes." "My father is dying." The words tumbled out of Royce. "Wade Langston beat him, left him for dead. He said, 'I know Wade Langston.'" Ashki's voice went cold, hard as winter steel. He stepped close, invading Royce's space. "2 weeks ago, he and his men rode through our hunting grounds. They killed 3 of our people, took their horses, left their bodies for the crows." He stopped, inches from Royce's face. "Your father sends you here now, when he needs us. Where was Sterling Rhodes when we were burying our dead?" Royce's blood ran cold. This was not the welcome he had hoped for. This was an accusation. "He didn't know," Royce stammered. "We're 2 days' ride south. If he had known." "If he had known, what?" Ashki's eyes bored into him. Would he have come to help us, or would he have stayed safe on his ranch and told himself it was not his fight? Royce opened his mouth. Then he closed it. The honest answer. The honest answer would doom him. But a lie would be worse. These men could smell a lie. "I don't know," Royce said, his voice quiet. "I don't know what he would have done." He met Ashki's gaze. "I only know what he taught me. That you judge people by their actions, not their skin. That a promise kept is worth more than gold. That your people kept their word to him for 20 years. And he kept his word to you. Words." Ashki turned away in disgust, spitting on the ground. White men are very good with words. They sign treaties with words. They make promises with words. Then they break everything and say the words meant something different. A murmur of agreement rippled through the warriors who had gathered, forming a silent circle around them. Royce felt the hostility like heat from a fire. He was one boy, surrounded by men who had every reason to hate him. He was failing. His father was dying. "Then don't listen to my words," Royce said, his voice rising, desperate. "Test me." Ashki stopped. He turned back slowly. "Test me," Royce repeated. "Whatever way you test your own warriors. If I fail, I'll die here, and you'll owe my father nothing. But if I pass, you'll know I'm not like Wade Langston. You'll know my father's word is true." Silence fell over the camp. Utter, complete silence. Even the children had stopped whispering. Ashki turned back, and for the first time, something shifted in his expression. It wasn't respect. Not yet. But it was. Curiosity. "You would submit to our test," Ashki said, "without knowing what it is. You would risk your life on a test you may not be able to pass. My father is already dead if I don't." Ashki studied him for a long, long moment. Then he spoke in Navajo to the gathered warriors. Arguments erupted immediately. The scarred warrior, Royce heard them call him Takakota, spoke vehemently, gesturing at Royce with clear, undisguised contempt. Another warrior, an older man with gray in his hair, responded in sharp, clipped tones, his hand on a knife. The debate raged for several minutes. Royce stood motionless, his heart pounding, understanding none of it, but feeling his fate being decided in a language he couldn't comprehend. Finally, Ashki raised his hand. The arguing stopped, instantly. 3 days, Ashki said to Royce. His voice was flat, the voice of a judge passing sentence. You will go into the West Canyon. You will go with nothing but the clothes you wear. No weapons, no food, no water. Royce felt his throat go dry. You will survive, Ashki continued, as our young warriors survive when they come of age, by respecting the land, by being smart, by being strong. He stepped closer, his dark eyes locking onto Royce's. Many of our warriors fail this test. Some die. All come back changed. If you come back at all, we will talk about Wade Langston. If you do not, your father will die knowing his son was weak. 3 days. In the desert, with nothing. Men died in hours out there without water. Where do I go? Royce managed to ask, his voice hoarse. Takakota will show you the path. It is marked with white stones. Follow it until you can follow no more. Then, find your way back. Ashki's expression was unreadable. But know this, boy. Your father's honor bought you this chance. Your own honor must carry you through it. We will be watching. If you cheat, if you steal, if you show disrespect to the land, you will not see the 4th sunrise. When do I start? Now. Ashki gestured. Takakota and another warrior moved to flank Royce. They grabbed his arms, not gently. They took his hat. They emptied his pockets, taking his knife and the small piece of jerky. They left him with his shirt, his pants, and his boots. As they led him away from the camp, away from the smell of cooking fires and the sight of water skins, Royce looked back once. Ashki stood watching, his arms crossed. In his eyes, Royce saw both a challenge and something that might have been pity. Behind Ashki, the camp's fires burned bright in the gathering darkness. Ahead of Royce, the canyon waited. Dark and silent and hungry, ready to test whether Sterling Rhodes' son was made of the same steel as his father, or if he was just another white boy with more courage than sense. The first day, Royce still had hope. Takakota had led him to a narrow opening in the rock, pointed and said, West, you have 3 sons. Then he had vanished. The white stones marked a path that climbed through narrow passages, where the canyon walls pressed so close he could touch both sides with outstretched arms. His mouth was already dry, his tongue thick against the roof of his mouth. He'd been a fool. He should have drunk more water at the stream before he was captured. He should have guzzled it. But regret was useless. He remembered his father's lessons. Survival. Find water first. Shelter second. Food can wait. The problem was, this canyon seemed deliberately designed to hide both. Every shadow promised cool relief, but delivered only more hot rock and choking dust. By sunset of the first day, his lips were already cracked and bleeding. He found a narrow overhang, a shallow cave that offered some protection from the wind that picked up after dark. The cold was a shock. The desert burned you alive by day, then tried to freeze you solid by night. He wrapped his arms around himself, shivering, and tried not to think about his father, lying in that ruined house, alone, counting his breaths. He tried not to think about the water skins back in Ashki's camp. The second day was worse. The sun climbed, a merciless white eye in a bleached blue sky. It turned the canyon into an oven. His tongue felt like a piece of dry leather in his mouth. Every step required conscious thought. Lift foot, move, plant. He found a rock face, a sheer wall where the morning dew had collected in tiny, shallow cracks. He spent an hour, his face pressed to the stone, licking moisture from the rock. He got maybe a single precious mouthful of water for his effort. It was just enough to keep him moving, but not enough to let him think clearly. He saw movement in the rocks, a lizard, sunning itself. He was slow, delirious. But the lizard was slower. His hands, cracked and bleeding, shot out. He caught it. He killed it quickly, with a sharp rock, his father's training taking over. He ate it raw. He had no way to make fire and no time to learn. The taste, the texture, made him gag. He choked it down, his body rebelling. But it was protein. It was energy. His father would have been proud of the practicality, even as it made Royce want to vomit. He kept moving. The white stones had disappeared, or maybe he'd just lost the path. It didn't matter. The canyon all looked the same. Red walls, blue sky, and heat. Heat that made the air shimmer, that created phantom lakes of water just ahead, that always vanished when he got close. By the third morning, Royce had accepted that he was going to die. He was sitting in the shade of a boulder, his head in his hands, trying to summon the energy to stand. Giving up meant his father died alone. He had to stand. He had to move. He pushed himself up, his legs shaking, his vision swimming with black spots. He stumbled forward. And then he heard it. A sound that didn't belong. Not the wind, not a coyote, not a bird. A groan, human, and full of pain. He followed the sound, his own agony forgotten. He rounded a bend, pushing through a tangle of dry brush. And he found him. A Navajo warrior, slumped against the canyon wall. He was young, maybe Royce's age, with an ugly, gaping wound in his thigh. Something metal had torn right through the flesh. It wasn't a bullet. The wound was wrong for that. It was a trap. A bear trap. Royce recognized the jagged, cruel edges. He'd seen what these traps did to animals. The ones the white hunters used. The ones his father forbade on their land. The young warrior's eyes were closed, his face gray with blood loss. His breathing was shallow. He was dying. Royce could walk away. He should walk away. He was barely alive himself. He had nothing to offer, no supplies, no strength, no water. Helping this warrior would be suicide. It would kill them both. And if he failed the test, his father died anyway. He stood there, his mind fogged with thirst, weighing his father's life against this stranger's. Then he thought about what his father had said, the words that had gotten him this far. You judge a man by his actions. He knelt beside the warrior. The warrior's eyes snapped open, recognition flickered there. He'd seen Royce. He'd been one of the warriors in the camp who had watched, his face full of contempt. He tried to speak, but only managed a pained wheeze. I'm going to help you, Royce said. His voice was a raw croak, and he had no idea how he'd keep the promise. He tore strips from his own shirt, already ragged from 3 days in the canyon. He had to stop the bleeding. His hands shook, partly from exhaustion, partly from knowing this decision had just sealed his fate. He wrapped the strips of cloth around the warrior's thigh, pulling as tight as he could. The warrior cried out, a sharp, ragged sound that echoed off the rocks. Then he fell silent again, conscious, but weak. Too weak to stand, too weak to walk. Royce looked at the warrior. He looked at the canyon walls, sheer and impossible. He had no water to give, no food, barely enough strength to stand himself. But he had made his choice. He hooked his arms under the warrior's, got the man's arm around his shoulders, and lifted. The warrior was heavier than he looked. Royce's legs, starved of water and food, nearly buckled. He locked his knees, found his balance, and started walking. Every step was agony. His vision swam. The warrior's weight pressed down on him like he was carrying the whole mountain on his back. Time lost all meaning. It wasn't days or hours. It was just pain. He fell twice, dragging them both down into the dust. Each time he got back up. He had to, because stopping meant dying, and dying meant failing. The sun moved across the sky, a silent, burning witness. His feet found a rhythm. Step, drag, step, drag. The warrior's blood soaked into what was left of Royce's shirt. His own breath came in ragged gasps that hurt his raw throat. He had no idea if he was going the right direction. He had no idea if he was walking toward the camp or just deeper into the wilderness. He just kept moving, because movement was all he had left. When the shadows appeared ahead, human shapes coming toward them, Royce thought it was another hallucination. He'd been seeing things for hours, phantoms in the shimmering heat, but these shadows had voices. They were speaking in rapid Navajo. Hands caught him as his legs finally gave out. Someone, strong, took the wounded warrior from his shoulders. The last thing Royce saw before the darkness took him, before the desert finally claimed its due, was Ashki's face. The war chief was looking at him, with an expression he couldn't read at all. Then the world went black. Royce woke to the smell of smoke and sharp, clean herbs. His throat felt like he'd swallowed a pound of sand. Every muscle in his body screamed in protest. He was lying on soft furs inside a shelter. Firelight danced on the walls. Someone had cleaned him. They had bandaged the cuts on his feet, cuts he hadn't even known were there. A clay cup appeared in front of his face. Ashki held it. His expression was still unreadable. "Drink," he said, slowly. The water was cool. It was the best thing Royce had ever tasted in his life. He wanted to gulp it down, to pour the whole thing down his throat. Ashki pulled it away after a few sips. "Too much at once, and you will be sick." Ashki sat back on his heels, studying Royce. The silence stretched. "You passed the test," Ashki said finally. He paused. "More than passed it. You nearly killed yourself, to save one of our warriors." Is he alive?" Royce rasped. "He is, because of you." Ashki's eyes seemed to look right through him. "The warrior you carried, the one you found in the trap, he is Kie, my younger brother." Royce's mind, still foggy, tried to process this. Ashki's brother. That's why the trap. That's why the wound. "Kie had been tracking Wade Langston's men," Ashki said, his voice low and tight with a new anger. "He found where they were poisoning the upper creek. He was coming back to warn us when he stepped in one of their traps. A white man's trap. We had been searching for him for 2 days," Ashki said. "We thought he was dead. So Langston was their enemy, a direct, proven enemy. Wade Langston sets traps for my people." Ashki's jaw tightened, the 3 scars on his cheek standing out. "For our hunters, for our horses, for anyone who gets in his way." His eyes met Royce's. 3 weeks ago, he attacked our hunting party, killed 3 warriors. Last week, he burned a shelter where families slept. An old woman and 2 children died in the fire. Ashki's voice was flat, but the pain beneath it was a living thing. "Your father was right," Ashki said. "Wade Langston is everyone's problem. He takes land from settlers like your father, thinking they are weak. He takes land from my people, thinking we are weak. He kills anyone who stands between him and what he wants." "Then we have the same enemy," Royce whispered, sitting up. The world spun for a second, then settled. "We do." Ashki stood, a tall, hard silhouette against the firelight. He walked to the shelter's entrance. "You want me to bring warriors to save your father," he said, looking out at the camp. "I want Wade Langston dead. These desires align." He turned back, his face a mask of hard-won resolve. "But you need to understand what you are asking, Royce, son of Sterling. This is not a rescue. If we go to war against Wade Langston, many will die. On both sides. This is the beginning of blood that will not stop until one side is completely destroyed." "My father is dying," Royce said, the simple, terrible truth. "I know." Ashki's voice softened, just a fraction. and because you saved my brother, because you proved your honor when death was easier, I will help you." He stepped closer. "But not just for your father, for my people. For the 3 warriors Wade murdered. For the grandmother and the children he burned alive." Ashki stepped outside the shelter and raised his voice. He spoke in Navajo, a single sharp sentence that cut through the night. Royce heard the word spread through the camp, like fire catching in dry grass, a call, a shout, an answer. Within minutes, warriors began to gather. They came from the shelters, from the canyon paths, from the shadows. They came with rifles. They came with bows. They came with knives that had been in their families for generations. They came because Ashki had called them. And they came because a white boy, an enemy, had nearly died to save one of their own. Ashki returned to the shelter. 400 warriors, he said. Every man who can ride and fight. We leave at first light. 400. Royce's mind reeled. Langston had 10 men, maybe 20 by now. Langston has perhaps 20 men, Royce said, struggling to stand. More are joining him, Ashki said, kneeling to help Royce, steadying him. Men drawn by his promises of land and gold, but he will not expect us. Ashki's eyes hardened. White men like him. They never do. They think we are scattered, afraid, weak. They think we will let them take our land, piece by piece, without fighting back. He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. It was the smile of a wolf baring its teeth. They are wrong. This time, we show them exactly how wrong they are. Outside, the camp transformed. The energy shifted from a quiet village to a staging ground for war. Warriors checked weapons, prepared horses, painted their faces with marks Royce didn't understand, but he recognized the purpose. Battle. "Can you ride?" Ashki asked. Royce's body screamed at the very thought. His feet were raw, his muscles torn. But he looked at Ashki's face, at the 400 men preparing to die for his father. He nodded. "I'll ride." "Good." Ashki handed him a rifle. It was his own rifle, the one Takakota had taken from him days ago. "A warrior earns his weapon," Ashki said. "You earned this twice over." Ashki handed him a water skin and a piece of dried meat. "Eat. You will need your strength." As Royce's hands closed around the familiar wood and metal, as he drank the water that tasted like life itself, he thought of his father, lying broken in that house, counting breaths, waiting. "Hold on, Pa. Just hold on a little longer. I'm coming home, and I'm bringing an army with me." Around him, 400 warriors prepared for war. The canyon walls echoed with their voices, their movements, their shared, silent determination. Wade Langston had made enemies of the wrong people. Now, he would learn that lesson, in blood and in fire. They rode at dawn. 400 warriors moving through the canyon not as a crowd, but as a single entity. A flood of silent, focused fury. Royce rode beside Ashki at the front. He was still weak, every muscle aching, but he was kept upright by a strange, cold determination. And a terrible, driving fear. Fear that they would be too late. Fear that his father had already counted his last breath. Fear that Wade Langston had returned and finished what he started. The scarred warrior, Takakota, rode on his other side. The man who had wanted to kill him days ago now treated him with a new, grudging respect. In the warrior culture, saving a chief's brother meant something. It changed how they looked at him, how they spoke to him. It made him, in their eyes, not just a white boy. It made him worthy. As they traveled south, moving faster than Royce had ever thought possible, Ashki explained the plan. They wouldn't ride straight in. They would circle wide, approach the Barrett Ranch from 3 directions at once. Langston's men, if they were still there, would be trapped, pinned between the canyon wall and the Navajo. No escape route. Quick, efficient, final. You understand? Ashki said as they rode, his eyes on the horizon. That some of Langston's men will try to surrender when they see our numbers. Royce nodded. We will not accept it, Ashki said, his voice flat. Royce's head snapped around. What? You'll kill men who surrender? Ashki turned to look at him, his expression cold. Would Langston have accepted surrender from my grandmother and those children when he burned them alive? Did he accept surrender from the 3 warriors he murdered? He looked back to the horizon. This is not a white man's war, Royce. This is not a game with rules and codes of honor. This is survival. Wade Langston declared this war when he started killing my people. Now, he will face the consequences. Royce said nothing. Part of him, the part his father had raised, wanted to argue. Wanted to say there had to be mercy, even in violence. But another part, the part that had seen his father's ruined face, the part that had seen the blood on the porch, the methodical cruelty of men who beat an unarmed man nearly to death. That part stayed silent. That part understood. They covered in one day what had taken Royce 3 days of desperate, panicked riding. 400 riders moving with a purpose and a rage that seemed to bend the land itself to their will. By late afternoon, they crested the final ridge overlooking the Barrett Ranch. Royce's heart seized in his chest. Smoke. Smoke rose from the property. Not the thin, gray smoke of a cooking fire. This was the thick, black, oily smoke of something burning. Through the haze, he could see them, figures moving around the buildings, and there were more of them, not 10, not 12. Royce counted 20, 25, maybe 30. They had wagons, they had a lot of rifles, and they were digging. They were tearing the place apart, looking for the phantom gold. But that wasn't the worst part. On the small rise where the lookout had been, the one Royce had tricked with the chickens, something new glinted in the late-day sun. It was a Gatling gun, mounted, aimed, and covering the entire front approach to the house. Langston hadn't just come back. He'd come back with an army of his own. He wasn't just searching, he was occupying. Ashki raised his hand. The entire column stopped. 400 warriors fell silent on the ridge, a force of nature waiting to be unleashed. From this distance, they were invisible to the men below. How many? Ashki asked, his voice tight. 30, Royce said, his mouth dry. And they have a machine gun, on the ridge. It covers the whole valley. Ashki's face hardened. This changed things. A Gatling gun, in the open, could cut down 400 warriors in minutes. It turned a battle into a slaughter. And your father? Royce scanned the property desperately. The house. They'd set fire to the barn. The smoke was pouring from the hayloft, but the house itself was still standing. Langston and his men were using it as a headquarters, which meant his father. Was he still alive? A prisoner in his own home? Or had they finished him when they arrived? I don't know, Royce whispered. He's in the house. If he's still. Ashki turned to Takakota and spoke rapid, sharp instructions in Navajo. Takakota nodded, his face grim, and rode back along the line of warriors. He divided them. 3 groups. The precision was terrifying. No confusion, no debate. Each warrior knew his job. The gun changes the plan, Ashki said, turning back to Royce. We cannot attack from the open. We would be butchered. So what do? Royce asked, desperation creeping into his voice. We give them a fight they expect. Ashki pointed to Takakota, who was leading a group of 300 warriors to the north. Takakota will create a diversion. Mirrors, dust, rifle fire. He will make 30 men look like 300. He will draw the gun's fire. And us? Royce asked. And we, Ashki said, will use a door they do not know exists. He looked at Royce. Your grandfather, the stories Langston heard, were they all lies? Royce's mind flashed back. Stories his father told him, a hidden cellar, a cold room his grandfather built that was always damp. The barn, Royce said, his eyes widening. No, under the barn. My grandfather built a root cellar, but it's more than that. It's a tunnel. It leads from the creek bed, 500 yards out, and comes up under the barn. He was a smuggler, Ashki stated. It wasn't a question. I think so, Royce admitted. The gold story. It must have been a cover for the tunnel, a way to explain the digging. Ashki smiled, the wolf's smile again. Wade Langston heard the right story, but got the wrong treasure. He turned to his remaining 100 warriors. We go. We follow Royce to this tunnel. We come up behind them, while they are watching Takakota's ghosts. We will become the nightmare at their backs. My father, Royce said. Your job is to reach your father, Ashki said, his voice hard. Get him out. My job, he put his hand on his knife, is Wade Langston. They moved. Royce led the 100 warriors down into the dry creek bed, the same one he'd used to escape. They moved silently, bent low, 100 shadows against the setting sun. He found the opening, hidden behind a curtain of dry vines, a dark, black hole in the earth. To the north, the battle began. Crack, 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 rifle fire, then shouts, then the terrifying mechanical thud, 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 thud of the Gatling gun as it opened up, spraying bullets at Takakota's diversion. Now, Ashki breathed. Royce slipped into the darkness. The warriors followed one by one. The tunnel was small, damp, and smelled of earth and rotting wood. They moved in single file, their hands on the shoulders of the man in front. It was suffocating. Royce's heart hammered. Then they saw it. A faint square of light ahead. The trap door. Under the barn. Ashki put a hand on Royce's shoulder. Stopped him. The barn was on fire. They could hear the roar of the flames above them. The smoke was already pushing down into the tunnel, making their eyes water, making them cough. They were in another trap. They set the barn on fire, Royce choked. We can't go up there. We must, Ashki said, his voice calm, but hard as iron. We go through the fire. It is the only way. He pushed past Royce, put his shoulder to the trapdoor, and heaved. It opened into a vision of hell. The barn was an inferno. The hayloft was gone, raining down embers. But the main floor where they stood was still clear, the fire burning above them. It was an exit, but it was also a death sentence. They're all outside, Ashki yelled over the roar. Watching the gun, watching Takakota. They've left the house unguarded. Go! He pointed to the main house. The 100 warriors burst from the tunnel, charging out of the burning barn like demons from the earth. Langston's men, their backs to the barn, their faces turned to the ridge, didn't know what hit them. The attack was brutal, silent, and final. No rifles, just knives and tomahawks and a rage 400 strong. It wasn't a battle. It was an execution. Royce didn't watch. He ran. He sprinted from the barn, across the 20 yards of open ground, and crashed through the broken front door of his home. Pa! The house was full of smoke from the barn. Pa! Royce! The voice, weak, from the back bedroom. He ran, skidding on the scattered papers. His father was there, still in the bed, but 2 of Langston's men were with him. They were trying to move him, to take him hostage, using him as a shield. They saw Royce. They dropped Sterling and raised their rifles. Royce didn't think. He fired from the hip. The kick of the rifle slammed his shoulder. One man went down, clutching his chest. The other one fired, the bullet screaming past Royce's head, shattering the wall behind him. Royce's rifle was empty. He'd only had 1 shot. The man smiled, a ugly, yellow-toothed grin, and leveled his pistol at Royce's heart. He was 16. He was fast with a rifle. But he was dead. A shadow filled the doorway behind him. Takakota. The scarred warrior threw his knife. It spun, end over end, and buried itself in the gunman's throat. The man gurgled, his eyes wide with surprise, and collapsed. Royce stared, his breath catching. "The debt is paid, white boy," Takakota grunted. He pulled his knife free. "Get your father." Royce grabbed his father. Sterling was lighter now, terrifyingly light. He was barely conscious. "I'm here, Pa. I'm getting you out." "Good. Boy," Sterling whispered, his one good eye finding Royce's. Royce carried him out the front door, into the chaos. The battle was almost over. Langston's men were dead or dying. The Navajo warriors were moving through the property, silent and efficient. The Gatling gun on the ridge had fallen silent. Takakota's diversion had worked. Then Royce saw them, Ashki and Wade Langston. They were by the corral. Langston was on his knees. Ashki stood over him, his knife in his hand. But Langston... he was holding something, a small, dark object. "Call them off," Langston yelled, his voice cracking with panic as he saw Royce. "Call them off, or it burns." He was holding a medicine bundle, a sacred item, small and beaded, the one Ashki had lost. Ashki froze. He couldn't risk it. "Call them off," Langston shrieked again, fumbling for a match. "He's bluffing," a voice whispered. Royce looked down. It was his father. Sterling was awake, his one eye clear and burning with a cold fire. "The gold," Sterling gasped, his hand gripping Royce's arm. "It was never gold. The tunnel. The tunnel." Royce understood. "He doesn't know about the tunnel," Royce yelled at Ashki. "The gold story was a lie. He's looking for the wrong thing." Langston's eyes widened. He looked from Royce to the burning barn to the ground beneath his feet. He finally understood what he had missed. It was only a second. A single, fatal second of distraction. Sterling Roads, the man Royce thought was broken and dying, who he was carrying like a child. His hand moved. Not with a rifle, not with a knife. He'd pulled a tiny two-shot Derringer from his boot, a gun Royce had never, ever seen. He fired. The shot was small, a pop in the chaos. But it was enough. The bullet hit Langston's hand, shattering his wrist. He screamed and dropped the medicine bundle. Before the bundle even hit the dirt, Ashki's arrow took Langston in the throat. The man who had taken what he wanted, who had buried those who stood in his way, crumpled to the ground. Silence fell over the ranch, broken only by the roar of the burning barn and the ragged, painful breathing of Sterling Roads. Justice had come. Not the kind from a courtroom, the older kind, the kind carved from necessity and honor and blood. The Navajo medicine man was ancient. His face was a map of wrinkles, each one earned through a long life of healing. He worked over Sterling Roads with practiced hands. No mysticism, no chanting, just knowledge. He applied poultices made from desert plants. He wrapped the broken ribs with strips of leather, soaked in something that smelled sharp and clean. He set the bones. He cleaned the wounds. He stitched the skin. His ribs punctured his lung, the medicine man explained to Royce, his English careful. The bleeding inside stopped, but the damage is great. He will live. Royce let out a breath he felt like he'd been holding for a week. "But he must rest," the medicine man said, his dark eyes serious. "For many weeks, no riding, no work, just breathing and healing." For 3 weeks, Sterling stayed in the Navajo camp, recovering in Ashki's own shelter. And for 3 weeks, Royce stayed with him. He learned more about the people his father had respected for so long. They weren't savages. They were families, children who laughed, elders who told stories, warriors who valued honor above all else. Key, Ashki's brother, the one Royce had saved, recovered alongside Sterling. His leg would always carry a scar, but he walked without a limp. He and Royce spent hours together, Kie teaching him Navajo words, Royce teaching him better English. A friendship formed from shared survival. When Sterling could finally sit up without pain, Ashki came to visit. The 2 men, the white rancher and the Navajo chief, talked for hours. They spoke of Wade Langston's death, and they spoke of what came next. The Barrett Ranch. It borders our hunting grounds, Ashki said. For 20 years you respected that, but other white men will come. More Langstons. They will see empty land, and they will try to take it. What do you propose? Sterling asked. A permanent alliance, Ashki said. The Rhodes family protects our border from your side. We protect yours from ours. Any white man who wants to take your land must go through us. Any threat to our people. You warn us. You fight with us. He leaned forward. We will be more than neighbors. We will be allies, brothers, in protecting what is ours. Sterling, his ribs wrapped, extended his hand. Ashki took it. The agreement was sealed, not with paper, not with lawyers, but with the grip of two men who understood that a man's word was the only law that mattered. A month after the battle, Royce and Sterling rode home. A dozen Navajo warriors rode with them. Not as guards, as friends. They helped rebuild what Langston's men had destroyed. They built a new barn, stronger than the first. They repaired the front door. They fixed the broken furniture. They scrubbed the blood from the porch until no trace remained of the violence that had nearly ended the Rhodes family line. On the day the warriors prepared to leave, Ashki pulled Royce aside. You came to us a boy, he said, terrified and desperate. You return home. A man. What's the difference? Royce asked. A boy thinks courage means never being afraid, Ashki said, his eyes wise. A man knows courage means acting despite the fear. He put his hand on Royce's shoulder. You were afraid in that canyon. I saw it in your eyes, but you saved my brother anyway. That is what makes you a man. He handed Royce a small carved stone, an eagle, its wings spread, the same kind of marker his father had found by the well all those years ago. Keep this, Ashki said. Show it to any of my people, and they will know you are under our protection. They will know. You are a brother. After the warriors left, Royce and Sterling stood on their new porch, watching the dust settle in the evening light. The ranch looked the same, but everything had changed. The land they stood on was no longer just theirs. It belonged to an alliance, a promise forged in blood and honor. I'm proud of you, son, Sterling said, his voice quiet. He put his arm around Royce's shoulders. You did what I couldn't. You brought justice. You earned their respect through action, not just words. Royce looked at the small stone eagle in his hand. He looked out at the horizon, where his new allies had disappeared. He thought about the boy who had ridden north a month ago, desperate and alone. That boy was gone. In his place stood someone different. Someone who understood that honor was earned through sacrifice, that trust was built through action, and that sometimes the only family that mattered was the one you were willing to fight for. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. We've got another story of frontier justice, just like this one, queued up for you. Click the video on your screen now to watch another unforgettable tale, where courage and honor collide in ways you never expected. Your support means everything to us.